To begin, bring yourself into a comfortable seated position in the middle of your mat, facing off the short end. That might mean that your feet are one in front of the other in Siddhasana, or you might be stacking your shins on your feet in Sukhasana. If you find that your knees are higher than your hips, feel free to sit on a blanket or a block or something to help elevate the hips and release the knees down, release the inner hips and thighs. As you find your seat where you feel connected to the ground and you're comfortable through your hips, knees, and ankles, get a sense of your spine lengthening up out of your seat. We'll do a little check-in in terms of how you are, what you bring to the mat. So where your energy is, if you're working with a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being virtually asleep and 10 being bouncing off the walls, where are you? How do you feel energetically in this moment? What sort of awarenesses do you have in your body today? Is there some part of your body that you've worked recently that feels sore or tight? Or any injury that you've experienced that you're still aware of? And if you've been practicing from the previous 2 levels and have done some home play in between the rounds, how has that gone? How has the awareness of your breath gone for you? Have you been able to become more aware of your breath on a day-to-day basis? Noticing if you're holding your breath or if your breath changes in awkward situations? And in those moments when you notice it, you have an opportunity to change it. So we're working with Ujjayi Pranayama in terms of changing the breath. We're finding the ocean sound of the breath in the throat. And this, again, may be a new practice for you, so just see how you go. Breathing in and out through your nose and being aware of the breath, the sound quality of the breath. So if you're congested, you might be hearing that. As you become more comfortable with breathing in and out through your nose, narrow your throat so that you can hear the breath more in your throat and less in your nose. Sounds a little bit like Darth Vader on a good day, a gentle sound. Or the sound of the ocean in a shell. So we tune into the quality of the breath and listen for balance in the length and also the tone between the inhale and the exhale. This is a very equalizing breath, especially when you're creating that evenness on the in-breath and the out-breath. And as you're breathing, bring your palms together at your heart center so your thumbs connect into your sternum, your breastbone. And use that connection to remind the sternum to lift up so that you create more room for the bottom of the lungs, the low ribs and the belly lengthen, and you find your posture above your seat so you're not leaning forward over your thighs. See if you can also get a sense of the back of your skull being drawn up towards the sky. So as you lengthen the back of your neck, that'll help lift the sternum, create more room for the lungs to expand, so you have room in your body for the breath. A lot of what we're doing in these practices is stretching those breathing muscles so that you can take a deeper breath, so that you can expand your breathing capacity. And as you're slowing and steadying and tuning into your breath, allow that to bring you into connection with your inner teacher. I'm here as an external teacher, but in the practice, you tune in to your inner teacher and also to the long line of teachers that bring this practice to you today. And the way that we do that with the voice is with the mantra, Om Namo Gurudev Namo. If you're not yet comfortable making sound, then listen and absorb the meaning and the vibrations of the sound as I do it. If you're joining in, take a breath in for the first of 3. As you inhale, lift your arms up overhead, and exhale, stretch them back behind you. Continue circling your arms with your breath. Inhale, stretch up. Exhale, reach back. So you open across your chest, moving your arms to your pace of breathing. So listening still to the pace of your breath and letting that determine the movement of your arms. Keeping your spine tall in between so your arms move like propeller blades on either side of your body. Noticing what you feel in your shoulders, if there's any difference left to right, if you have any clunky bits or sounds in there in your shoulder joints. And using this very simple exercise to shrug off with each exhale, with each movement back with your arms, to shrug off whatever you brought onto the mat that isn't needed, whatever you can let go of for the time you're here on the mat. The next time you bring your arms out about shoulder level, pause there and stretch back so you get a sense of stretching across your chest. Spread your fingers out and open the heels of your hands so that you open out through the whole hand. And then lift your head and stretch your tongue out. Inhale, open your jaw and your face. Exhale, shake it loose. Arms and head and face. And do that twice more. Inhale, stretch back, open everything wide. Exhale, shake it loose. Make as much noise as you like. One last one. And then as you release, we're going to change the seat to come up into toe sit. So if you bring your knees underneath you, curl your toes under. You may have to help your little toes to curl under if they don't make it. Align your heels under your sits bones, the two bones under your butt cheeks. If that's really intense on your toes, they're tight, you might need to shift up onto your knees or use a block, and still keep your toes curled under so they get some stretch. Bring your hands alongside your ribs, so if you're a woman, you'll be about bra line level. And when you find where the backs of your hands are alongside your ribs, your fingers mostly behind you, so your elbows come forward a little bit. I call this chicken, so it'll look like you have little wings. Breathe then into the backs of your hands, so your side ribs expand out sideways. And as you exhale and they release back towards center, let your elbows drop down and find your stretch. So if it's too intense and you're holding your breath, then soften that movement down with your elbows and your shoulders. Take a couple more deep breaths, learning how to locate your breath in your side ribs, expanding them out on the inhale, releasing your elbows down on the exhale. And this next time that you exhale, bring your hands out from your sides and hold the fingers of your right hand with the left, catching the fingers and the thumb. Draw them back. Tuck your elbow in by your side and broaden your shoulders, stretching the underside of your wrist and breathing into that. Notice if your shoulders creep up or your jaw clenches. And if you look at your wrist while you're doing this, you'll see your thumb is about 1/3 of your wrist, so being sure to catch your thumb as well as your fingers. Give that hand one more breath as though you could breathe into your wrist, and then exhale and switch over to the other side. If you're really feeling your toes, if they're talking back to you, then come up onto your knees, breathing steadily, shoulders relaxed. Next time that you exhale, shake your hands out. And shift your weight forward so that you come into table pose with your hands onto the ground underneath your shoulders and your knees underneath your hips. And to stretch out the toes and the front of the feet, press your shins down into the ground. So we're going to roll into cat and cow. Start with cat pose to open your shins. Push the ground away with the base of your fingers and your shins and your ankles, and arch your back up towards the sky. And as you open your back towards the sky, like a cat puffing up its fur, exhale all of the air out, tuck your belly in, and then roll from your tailbone up to your head. Arch your body towards the floor as you inhale in cow pose, like you have a saddle on your back, a sway back. Roll between those two at your pace of breathing. Checking as you're finding your movement, as you release your head down on cat pose, look to see that your knees are under your front hips, so about a fist width apart. Thighs parallel to each other. The next time that you're in cat pose and you see that your knees are in that alignment, see that you can't see your feet. So you know your feet are right behind your knees with parallel lines through your legs. The next time that you inhale, see that your wrists are under broad shoulders so that you have room to draw your chest forward between your upper arms. So if it feels like it's difficult to make that action, to draw forward, to draw the shoulder blades down away from your neck and in towards each other, your hands may be too close together or too far forward. Plant the base of your fingers as best you can. If you're really feeling your wrists, you may need to lift them to stretch the fingers. And if you can, let your eyes close so that you're bringing your attention inside, rolling from your tailbone up to your skull, letting your head follow. Most of the day, most of our lives, the head leads. So give it this opportunity to follow the breath and follow the spine. Find your pace, just a few more of these. See if you can go just a little more dynamically with it. It might be you need to stay slow and steady if you're getting all the elements coordinated. This next time that you're rolling through center, pause there and table, so your spine isn't going in either direction, it's neutral, and take your weight into one hand and flip your other hand so the back of that hand is on the ground, with the back of your wrist facing the front edge of the mat, and your fingers pointing towards your body and fingernails facing the ground. Use the other hand to take the weight so you can determine how much stretch to take into that wrist. Find your breath as you're doing this. The shoulders tend to creep up as you do this, so let them stay as broad as possible. If you're fairly flexible in your wrist and you want to deepen the stretch, you can start to lengthen your arm and shift your weight back. So feel for where's your edge, where's the place that's enough to breathe into. And then unfold that hand and start from the fingertips of that same hand that you were working on and roll down from the tips of your fingers through the lengths of your fingers before you bring your palm down. So you feel the base of the fingers planted. And then switch over to the other hand using the weight in the hand that you just worked on so that you can determine the weight that you put into the back of the other wrist and finding out, is this wrist any different? Is it any tighter? And breathing as though you could breathe into the wrist. Which helps your mind stay connected to what you're doing. So even though the breath won't literally go into the wrist the way it would go into your side ribs, it helps you stay connected to what you're doing. So then reconnecting the palm of that hand, starting from your fingertips, roll down through the lengths of your fingers, checking that your wrists are under broad shoulders so you have lots of room. Come back into cat and cow. So rolling with your breath, finding your pace with this. If you have really flexible elbows and they lock easily, turn the points of your elbows to face the side edges of the mat, keeping your middle fingers pointing off the front edge of the mat and the crease of your wrists in line with that front edge. And as you find your pace with this, we're going to add the right leg into the action. Same movement with the spine, same breath. The next time you inhale into cow pose and your head is lifted, your belly is open, stretch your right leg back behind you and reach your toes away from your head. And then as you exhale, tuck your right knee in towards your head. So the more you push the ground away with your left shin and the base of your fingers, the more room you have to tuck your knee in underneath. Go back and forth between those two and see if you can feel how you're just extending what you were doing in cat and cow into your leg. So this is really good for digestion, which is why we start on the right side, stimulating the ascending colon and then moving over to the descending colon on the left. So if you're feeling your digestion's too quick, you may need to switch that. Otherwise, start on the right. Inhaling, lengthening from your head to your toes. Exhaling, tucking. And if your head and knee don't touch, just get a little bit closer each time. So the more you tuck your belly up, push the ground away, the more room you have. The next time you exhale, release your right knee and switch to your left. See if you can make a smooth transition, continuing with the breath as you switch over to the left leg. Letting your shoulders open off your back as you exhale and arch your back up, and then sliding your shoulder blades down and in, away from your neck, so they help to open the heart forward as you inhale. Noticing if there's any difference on this left side, if your head and knee connect a little more easily or if it feels about the same as the right. Next time that you exhale, release your left knee down next to the right knee, legs are together. Push the ground away with your hands and press your hips back over your heels into extended child, balasana or garbhasana, fetal child. Use your hands to push the ground away to take your hips back over your heels, and in that small tucked posture, breathe big. Breathe into your low back. And if you feel any issues with your low back, this is a good, easy posture to do in between longer practices. This is a restorative, grounding posture that helps you reconnect with your breath and with the earth, and also helps to lengthen your low back and your thighs. Keeping your breath flowing, use your next inhale to come back up into table pose. When your fingers are spread and your wrists are under broad shoulders, you'll most likely have your little fingers close to the edges of the mat, so that's a good gauge to work with. Coming back into the same thing that we just did, Prana, Apana, where you're inhaling, lengthening back through your right leg as you lift your head and open your front body. Exhaling, tucking your right knee in towards your head. This next time that you take your right leg long, bend your knee and lift it and open it out to the right, and then tuck it in towards your head. So you're making a circular motion with your leg and with your breath. Inhale, lengthen back behind you. Exhale, pull your right knee around to the side and then tuck in small. Inhale, lengthen along your midline, head from toes, and then lead with your knee. Draw it around to the side and in towards your head as you exhale. Finding your pace with this. And if you can imagine the movement of your leg opening up some energy in your hip joint. So you might start to feel some heat, some fire there in your right hip joint. And as you bring your right knee around to the side, notice what happens with the left elbow. It has a tendency to want to bend, but keep both arms long as though you're pressing the floor away, so you can really focus and isolate on the right hip. We're going to increase some of that heat in the right hip joint. So this next time that you're bringing your right knee around to the side, pause with your right knee right out from your hip at a right angle. And look over your right shoulder and see that you can't see your foot. Hide it behind your thigh, so you're leading more with your hip than your foot. Check that both arms are long, push the ground away, lift your belly up and breathe. Think of your breath lifting your right knee up, opening the inner thigh away from the ground. Using your exhale to soften the jaw, broaden the shoulders, push the ground away with your left shin and your hands. You're almost there. Use one more inhale to lift, and then as you exhale, release your knees together and down on the ground and press your hips back into extended child. Notice as you press back how you feel. How your hips feel, if you can feel the difference between the right and the left. Take your breath down into your low belly so it opens into your low back, and imagine being able to breathe into that right hip to give it a little bit more support and release. If your shoulders are up around your neck, push the ground away with your hands, maybe even walk them a little closer to you so you can slide your shoulders back onto your back. Steady your breath. If it got short or shallow from the intensity of that last exercise, lengthen it here. Use your next inhale to come back up into table, so bring a little more space between your knees so they're under your front hips. Check that your hands are under broad shoulders, and starting with cat and cow to move the breath along the spine. Then moving into Prana Apana on the left side. Inhale, lengthen your left leg long. Exhale, tuck in. Pressing down through your right shin, through the base of your fingers, especially on the exhale, using that leverage of pushing the ground away to tuck your knee under. So this next time that you lengthen back, bring your knee out to the side as you exhale, creating a big circular motion, noticing where's the point when you lift and open your knee out to the side that your right elbow wants to bend. Keeping your arms long, focusing into the hip joint, stirring it up. Finding whatever pace of movement here helps you get a sense of heat and energy in the hip joint. Starts to stir up and release out any tightnesses that have been held in the hip. Inhaling back and then coming around to the side and tucking in. And then coming into fire hydrant on the left side. So bringing your knee around to the side like a dog at a fire hydrant, and use what's on the ground to help you lift away from the ground. Push the ground away with the base of your fingers and your right shin. Look over your left shoulder and see that your foot is hidden behind your thigh and your knee is pointing off the side of your mat instead of back. So you have a right angle at your hip. Use your breath to help you stay, as though the inhale helps lift your leg, helps hold it up in space. The exhale takes away the tension that might have crept into your face, your jaw, your shoulders. Give it one more inhale, lifting up. As you exhale, release down and back into extended child. Knees together, pressing your hips back and focusing your breath into your left hip. Listen to your breath and use your next inhale to come back up, keeping your knees together this time. And as you come up, walk your hands a little bit wider so that you have room and you feel supported. Your hands can shift as we move into this. Take your hips into big circles, out to the sides and towards the front and back towards your feet. I always imagine being in a giant bowl of icing and trying to scrape the sides of the bowl with my outer hips. So big circles with your hips so you get a stretch in your outer hips and your waist. Each circle gets one breath. Inhale and exhale each circle. Feel free to move your hands so you feel you're not going to fall over to the sides and you're able to go forward and back freely. Next time that you inhale, change the direction of your circles. Then bring yourself back so that your hips are right above your knees. Knees still together, legs together. Walk your hands back so your hands are underneath broad shoulders. We're doing a lot on the hands and knees today, so we're going to stretch the wrists again. As you bring your hands underneath, like table, but with the legs together, lift your wrists and your thumbs off the ground. Stretch the lengths of your fingers. If you're not able to lift both thumbs off the ground, do one hand at a time so you can control the stretch and breathe into it. Find the stretch at the base of the fingers where they connect to the palm of the hand. And once you have a good stretch in both hands, plant your palms down, keeping the base of your fingers planted and spreading your fingers wide from each other so you can see triangles of your mat color between each. Then lift your feet up. If that doesn't work for your knees, even with extra cushion underneath, then bring your feet back down. If you lift your feet up, think of Barbie doll feet, like you have high heels on. So press the balls of your feet towards the back edge of the mat, but draw your toes back towards your shins. So both the fronts and the backs of your legs are engaged, and that will help support your knees. We're moving into cat presses. So if these are new to you, look and listen first before trying them, before you get into the middle of them. Draw your belly up into your low back. Support your low back with your belly so it feels like your tailbone is pointing towards the back edge of the mat. And keeping the crease of your wrists parallel to the front edge of the mat, bend your elbows and roll your elbows in towards your body so your upper arms hug your upper ribs and your elbow points point towards your hips. Really hugging in tight. Notice if your belly is swayed. Lift your belly up, lengthen your low back, and exhale, come forward ahead of your hands by bending your elbows, not by sinking your hips, but by bending your elbows. Inhale, come back up by lengthening your arms. Exhale, come forward. So you're rolling across the top of your knees. Be sure your knees feel safe here. If they don't, you might need to bring your feet down or cushion your knees. Really slow breath. The slower the breath, the more control you have, the more strength you're building. Control over the breath, but also strengthen the body. Keeping your low back long by lifting your belly up. Come forward ahead of your hands like you're going to dive off the front edge of the mat. So not down, but forward and a little bit down. You don't have to go too far. Just go to the point where you don't fall apart. So you know you're falling apart if your elbows splay out to the sides, your shoulders shrug up to your ears, or it feels like you have a saddle on your back. Lift your belly up, lengthen your low back. There you go. And this next one, this last one, we only need to do a few of these to get these. Hold this last one. When you get to your lowest point where you're still integrated, not falling apart, then breathe there. Tuck the elbows in, broaden the shoulders back, lift the belly up, push the ground away without lifting away from the ground. See if you can get a little closer. One more breath and use your exhale to lift back up and release back into extended child. So you're pressing your hips back by pressing the ground away with your hands. Let your head release down, keeping your knees together, so wherever your head releases to when your knees are together. Might touch the ground, might not. Notice what kind of energy you have from those really refined cat presses, a very modified push-up. The energy, the strengthening is in the upper arms, chest, and back. Now, if your head doesn't rest on the ground, take your knees wider or rest it on your hands or fists. If it rests on the ground, it might feel good on those strong arms to take your hands back by your feet and let your shoulders drape down. Release here, letting the breath soften, letting go of the intensity of holding yourself up, settling down into the ground. Noticing how you feel, if anything has shifted from when you began, when you stepped onto the mat. Bring your attention to your breath, if it's shifted away from your breath. Breathe into your hips and your low back. Expand your back ribs. Use your next inhale to uncurl and come up to kneeling. And as you're lifting up, lift your arms up overhead. Bring your palms together, and as you exhale, draw them down along your midline. Acknowledging yourself for being present with yourself in your practice today. Namaste.